Till September of 2024, I've never played a single Final Fantasy game in my life, so I decided to put a challenge to myself. Not only will I play every single Final Fantasy game for the first time ever, I would take the effort to 100% complete them to the best of my ability. Back in October, I successfully 100% completed Final Fantasy 1, and now we're here today for Final Fantasy 2. Let's get started. Unlike with Final Fantasy 1, you don't get to actually pick what class your 4 units are going to be in this game. You just get to pick their names, then you jump right into the story. We get dropped into a world where it's been peaceful for many years until the Emperor of Palmancia decides to shit up and just bring forth monsters from the underworld to make a mess of everything. A rebel army was forming, but unfortunately the Emperor took them down a notch before they could really start to do anything. So whilst fleeing to a hidden base, it turns out that us 4 people have lost our parents and lost effectively everything and are running away and getting countered by a bunch of Black Knights which utterly decimate us. Whilst escaping from Flynn and heading to Altea, we get encountered by Hilda and Winmu, who picks all of us up and takes us to their hidden base in Altea. We eventually wake back up and head out of our room to encounter both Guy and Maria, who's also perfectly fine, but unfortunately Leon seems to be missing. We then talk to Hilda, who lets us know about the happenings of the world currently and that we're here in Altea in the rebel base and she is a rebel leader. We do ask to join the rebel army, but she flat out denies us. But she lets us in on the first password that we'll need to collect in this game, Wild Rose. We then get informed that Leon is most likely up in Flynn, where the Empire currently has their claws all over. And we get told not to go because it's too dangerous, but you know, when has it ever stopped us? We head back to the room that we spawned in and we get given a lot of information about how the systems in this game works, and I'm just going to give you a brief run over. Unlike Final Fantasy 1, where there was just basic classes you picked and then you just level up those classes as the game goes along, instead, each and every single weapon has its own different levels in your character, as well as every single magic spell. The more you make use of a certain weapon type, the higher that weapon type becomes in levels and the better they become. Same follows suit with magic. The more you use magic, the higher that spell becomes in levels, but also the more expensive it gets to use magic point wise, but it also becomes stronger. Your various different stats also scale with whenever you take damage, deal damage with various different abilities and stuff along those lines. Your health pool will also only ever increase whenever you do take damage in any way, shape or form, but it also has a flat increase rate every 5 to 10 battles, as well as your magic points will only ever increase as you make use of said magic points. So you'll start off with 10 magic points on all of your characters, and in order to get more magic points, you'll have to use magic spells on that character to slowly grow that number. You also have the ability to dual wield most weapons in this game, except for the bow. The bow is the sole exception that requires 2 hands to use, as well as you want to keep in formation of being in the back row just because it's overall better for you. But ultimately, as I said, every melee weapon can be dual wielded. You can also have a shield instead, but I don't make use of that at all in this game because dual wielding just means overall more damage output, more levels increase, etc, etc. The final piece of information here is that there are 2 achievements that are going to be required from this type of thing, which is getting a weapon to level 16 and a magic spell to level 16. After some more information gathering as well as upgrading my gear, I start my journey towards Flynn, making a stop at Gautria along the way. After arriving in Flynn, we do indeed discover that, it's crawling with guards from the Empire. Who would have known? I decide to confront one of these guys, get into a bit of fight, get my ass successfully handed to me, except for Maria manages to run away before she dies, so that was fun. I quickly run back to Gautria to heal up and bring everyone back from the dead, and because I realize that there's still a chest in Altea that I need to grab, I head back there and grab that singular chest before going right back to Flynn and trying again. I eventually head into the tavern in Flynn and talk to the bartender. After giving him the password, he shows us to a secret passageway where we find Scott dying in a deathbed. After giving us some information of why Flynn fell so fast and giving us his ring, Scott then drops to the floor and vanishes in thin air. After collecting the 3 chests in the basement of this tavern, we start our journey back to Altea. After informing Hilda of the events that transpired up in Flynn, she decides to allow us to join the rebel cause and informs us about Mithril, telling us that a guy named Joseph was tasked in finding this. He currently lives in Salamand, and now it's on us to hunt him down and find out what he found out. After all this discussion, Minwoo joins the party, who also has a canoe, so we're going to be able to sail through the shallow waters in order to make our way to the next place. We also inform Gordon, Scott's brother, of the events that transpired in Flint and how he has passed on to the next land. And we hopefully have given the kick of courage that Gordon needs to pick up himself and hopefully do something good for the cause of the rebels. We then head up towards Plume, which we can then ask to join a pirate ship to have passage to Porth, which once we make it there, we buy some upgrades, we do some healing, and then head northwest to Salamand. After healing and getting some more upgrades, we then head into Joseph's house. We talk to him, we inform him that we're from Hilda and we want to know about the Mithril, but he says before he actually gives us any information on that, he wants us to prove that we're who he said we are and wants us to go free some people in Cedar Falls. I made quick work of most of this dungeon, eventually coming across a room that's got a bunch of people held up in it, and we find Paul again, who also is with Joseph's daughter. Apparently he was trying to get the Mithril before us, but then he got caught by Bogdan, who's here somewhere, which is kind of funny considering he's supposed to be the greatest thief of all time, but we don't acknowledge that. He decides that, I'm over my head, I'm going to lead this to you guys, and I'm going to take everyone here with me. Keep going. We clear out a few more floors in the dungeon until we eventually make our way into a room that has the Mithril as well as a sergeant waiting to fight us. I then finished clearing out the remainder of the floor that I was currently on, getting all but one of the chests available in this dungeon. We don't get the last one until later, and we head back to Salem to find Joseph again. We then head back to Altea to talk to Hilda to let her know that, hey, we have found Mithril. She then informs us, hey, you should go give it to the blacksmith there and he can make some cool stuff for you, which we do, and we purchase some more upgrades. Next, we need to make an attempt to stop the Dreadnought from launching. It's currently stationed over in Baskiff, so we head back to Paloom and we talk to Sid, who owns the airship, and ask for a trip to Baskiff. We then head to the southern side of Baskiff, where we come across a soldier who is apparently on the rebel side, tells us that we can go through the sewers in order to get over to the Dreadnought via the Baskiff cave. We then head in, and here's our next dungeon to clear out, collect all the chests for, and all the other fun stuff. When we finally make it to the end of the caves, we encounter the Dark Knight, who tells us it's too late, the Dreadnought's about to take off, and that we should consider siding with the Emperor if we don't want to die, before he disappears out of the cave. The Bogard comes out and says, haha, you're too late, you suck, come see for yourselves, and as he draws us outside, we see the Dreadnought lift off, take off, and drop bombs on Paloom, Porth, and Altea. And then we head back into the caves ourselves to grab the last chest, which contains the pass, before teleporting our way out of the dungeon. We then start our long journey back to Altea. We stop by Paloom, we talk to Sid, who's now inside of the tavern that's been heavily damaged. We learn some new words for passwords and stuff on those lines, as well as learning a possible method of destroying the Dreadnought, after which we take a ship back to port and then head back to Altea, where we encounter Hilda talking about what happened in the Dreadnought's attack. We also learn the king's condition has taken a turn for the worse, and Minwu leaves the party, leaving us back with 3 people once again. We learn some more information from Hilda, we then talk to the king, get a new keyword, use that with Hilda to get even more information about how we're going to get some Sunfire in order to destroy the Dreadnought, but first it's time to head back to Joseph. After discussing with Joseph with the current happenings in the world, he decides to join our party and tells us that we need to go back to Cedar Falls in order to grab his snowmobile. We make it there, he opens up a secret package, which we find the last chest of this dungeon, which also contains the snowmobile. Leaving that, we head over towards the snow cavern in order to start the journey for the goddess spell within it. We make our way through the dungeons, clearing out every single floor, collecting every single chest along the way until we encounter a room filled with giant beavers, one of which tells us that there's a secret passage in the wall to the right, which we then head into to find the last floor, which also contains the goddess spell. Once we make it down to the end of this floor, we get the last chest and encounter an Adamantoise who's protecting the goddess's bell. Once defeating the tortoise, we then collect the bell and start to make our way out of the dungeon. When we make it to the final staircase on the first floor, we encounter Bogdan, who's upset because we've already gotten the goddess spell long before he can even make the attempt to grab himself. So instead, he fights us. We handily hand his ass to him, but instead of accepting defeat like a gracious soldier should, it turns out he's booby-trapped this entire cave and quickly drops a boulder down the stairs, whom Joseph valiantly sacrifices himself in order to allow us to escape with the goddess's bell. Rest in peace, Joseph. We head back to Salamand, heal up, talk to Joseph's daughter, cry, and then head back to Paloom, where we take an airship over to Kashan in order to hunt down the Sunfire. We head inside the castle and unlock the door of the goddess's bell, encountering Gordon above the stairs, letting us know that, I thought I was the only one left who can actually open this. I'm trying to get the torch myself, but it's a dungeon in here, so I need some help. We help him, we clear through the dungeon. We clear through the dungeon and, as always, collect every single chest along the way that can be found. We inevitably make our way to the room that contains the torch, but unfortunately it seems like there's a red soul standing in the way guarding the damn thing. So after clearing it out, we grab the torch, we teleport out of the castle, head back into the top floor and grab the Sunfire. After we leave the castle with the fire, we encounter the Dreadnought flying above us, chasing down Cid's airship, inevitably capturing it and running away. We head south and encounter a Chocobo forest, which we can use to get back to Altea far quicker than what we could any other way. Once we make it back to Altea, we find out that Hilda actually employed Cid in order to make it to the Kashan Keep with us to meet us there. Unfortunately, she was on that airship when the Dreadnought picked it up, so now it's time to rescue her. With this new information, we head up to the northwest in order to hunt down the Dreadnought, which has landed for some resupply shenanigans. Although there's one fatal mistake that I've made here that I won't talk about until, well, the mistake is realized by me in-game. After entering the Dreadnought, instead of using the pass and the guard at the front staircase to get me inside of the actual Dreadnought itself, no, instead I decided to fight him and get absolutely destroyed. I survived somehow and make it through, but not without a lot of casualties and resource burn. After clearing out a few floors and freeing Hilda and Cid to allow them to escape to the airship ready to depart the moment I destroy the Dreadnought, the biggest thing that I forgot about previously is starting to slowly haunt me. My decision to not buy any form of resources such as health potions or any status effects potions. So for the most of my journey through the Dreadnought so far, all of my units have had blindness on them, which has just made things a little bit slower. By the time I was getting to the final floor, 2 of them now had poison and they were effectively almost dead. By the time I make it to the final set of chests that I need to open, I'm also pretty low on magic points. 2 of my units have no health left, effectively being one-shot by anything, and we come across one of the final chests which has a heal Geiger's and a few other units in there, meaning that I do need to use magic in order to actually kill them. But unfortunately, I'm in continuous issue of having to deal with the 2 units that are dead, try and revive them and try and survive, and I do give this a couple attempts to try and push through this, but ultimately my underpreparedness of having actual resources to spend for this fight caused me to have to backtrack to the save that I started off with before the Dreadnought, buy some items, and then do this all over again. Anyway, after making my way back to the Dreadnought again and clearing out the entirety of it again and collecting every single chest along the way, which is very important because once you complete the Dreadnought, it disappears. If you've missed any chests, you cannot complete it anymore and you will need to start all over again to collect that achievement. We destroy the Dreadnought and escape via the airship. Though one thing of note, Maria recognizes the voice of the Dark Knight at the bridge, which is something interesting. We get dropped off at Altea, learn the information that the king is effectively knocking on death's door. We go to talk to him. He gives us some very important information about the fact that we now need to work on unsealing the Ultima magic to use in an attempt to stop the Emperor. After saying those words, he then passes away. After the death of the king, we talk to Gordon on his little throne, who tells us about the Dragoons and the Wyverns, and pretty much tells us that's our next location that we need to go and find out more information. We find a sailor in Paloom who's willing to offer her ship in order to make our way towards Castle Dees. Unfortunately for us, after sailing for a little bit, it turns out that Lilia wants to actually take all the stuff that we currently hold because it looks like we've got some good stuff on us. But unfortunately for her, the tables have been turned and we're willing to fight her to keep our stuff. And after handily wiping her boys' asses clean, she decides, like, you know what, I know when I'm beat. And we ask her to join us in the cause to fight the Emperor, which she happily joins after getting a pretty light pass on her little attempt there, you know? But hey, new party member, temporarily. Once we make it to Castle Dees, we see a child at the front door who immediately runs away from us. We then encounter their mother up in the upper stairs area who tells us about the story of what happened here, that the Imperial soldiers basically murdered the entirety of the Dragoon and Wyvern population by poisoning the rivers that Wyvern drank out of, and when they were taken care of, they handily wiped the Dragoons off the floor. And after collecting all the chests within Castle Dees, we then head north to the caverns just above the castle. We head into the Dees Cavern, and you know the drill by now. It's time to clear out most of the dungeon. We're not going to do it all entirely right now, purely because we do need to head back to Castle Dees after we grab the pendant off of a corpse of a Dragoon and take the Wyvern down to the very depths of this area to drop him in a pool. So we clear out most of it, grab the pendant, head back to Castle Dees, grab the Wyvern, then head right back into the caverns again and clear it out entirely, even including the fun little enemies at the pool that we dropped the Wyvern in. After leaving the caverns, we head back to Altea. We find Hilda waiting in her room for us, and then she asks to speak to Farron alone. Very weird. She then starts to flirt with Farron, which is even weirder. Oh, wait, it's the Llama Queen. That is, unfortunate. I guess we now need to figure out where Hilda is, so after annihilating her, we then find out that, oh, the Colosseum has put up a new prize. And guess what? It's Hilda. I guess we gotta go claim that prize now. After heading to the Colosseum, the Emperor releases a behemoth for us to fight in the Colosseum. After handily beating it, we go up to the Emperor to claim our prize, and he knows we're the rebels, so our prize is a trap. We get thrown into a cell, but fortunately, Paul is around for some reason or another, so he lets us out. We then make our way through the dungeon as we always do, clearing out all the chests that we find on every single floor, and eventually we make our way to Hilda, which is when Gordon rejoins with her and runs away to distract the guards to let us also escape. Hopefully they get out fine this time. I head back to Altea to find out that plans have been laid to finally retake Flynn's castle, and both Hilda and Gordon are already raiding at the rebels camp near the castle itself, so we head there next. This is a location that's very important that you make sure you visit at least once, because this is completely missable, because it only appears after you complete the Colosseum, but immediately disappears after you complete Flynn's castle, which you do very, very quickly, and it's very important because you need it to get the Visit All Your Towns achievements. So we make our visit there, talk to Hilda, she tells us the plans that we're just going to go straight up to the castle and beat the person who's sitting in there's faces in, and then we retake it. And the plan goes off without a hitch. We successfully beat the Gotos that's currently sitting on the throne, and finally Hilda and Gordon make their way back into Flynn's castle for the first time in ages. With Castle Flynn retaken, it's time to finally start making active work in taking down the Emperor, which requires the use of the Ultima Tome, which we can claim from the Mithridian Tower, which requires 2 masks in order to enter the thing itself. Unfortunately, we have no idea where either of them are. Well, we know one of them's in the underground areas of Castle Flynn, the other one's probably in Mithridia somewhere, but of course, Hilda doesn't know where the actual entrance to the secret area of Castle Flynn is, because the king probably had that information and never handed it down. But after collecting all the chests from Castle Flynn, at least on the surface, we head over to Paul, who gives us the information about this secret passage that we can use to head down into the dungeon under the castle. I do eventually clearing out all of it but 3 chests that I just couldn't find. We'll get to them later, and I eventually claimed the mask from the bottom of the castle. It turns out that the missing 3 chests required you to use a secret passage within the secret passage. This is where a bit of my frustration with the secret passages of this game is coming from, which you haven't heard of me say you can complain about as of yet. But basically, on one of the staircases going down into the secret passage area of the castle, you need to walk through a wall and then get outside of the castle, and you can access to the last room that you haven't been able to access until this point, which contains the final 3 chests that you need to complete Castle Flynn's chests. After a somewhat long journey, we finally arrive at Mithridia, which we then do some healing, do some stock ups, and check out some potential upgrades. After that, I head to the underground area where there's a statue of the goddess, which we lay the white mask upon. Other information we gain while we're here is that there's a black mask in a little cave inside of a little island out in sea somewhere, which is obviously the next place we're going to go, as we're going to need that black mask to unlock the crystal rods, which will then allow us passage into the Meridian Tower. We eventually arrive at the tropical island. You know the drill by now. We're going to clear out all the chests in this dungeon, explore it all. We end up coming across some somewhat friendly faces who say that we're never going to be able to get to the black mask and other stuff along those lines. Eventually, though, as we go further into the island's dungeon shenanigans, we do get the black mask and collect every single chest along the way. With the black mask in tow, we head to Mithridian Cave, which we'll find in the middle of the mountains near Mithridia itself. When we head in there, we come across a Farron doppelganger, which we then give the mask, which allows us through. We then, of course, do the usual and collect every single chest in this area, one of them including the crystal rod, which will be necessary to enter the tower. On our way out towards the tower itself, we then go to Altea and heal up a little bit. When we enter the inlet sea near the Mithridian Tower itself, we then get swallowed up by Leviathan, which is the next one-time only dungeon, meaning you need to get the 5 chests that are here before you leave, otherwise you'll never be able to come back to grab them, and you'll fail to get the achievement in this run. And we also lose Leo when this happens. We get the 5 chests, we come across Ricard, which is the last Dragoon who was set out on the quest to try and claim the Ultima Tome for himself, right before the Emperor destroyed the Dragoons and Wyverns. We now get ready to enter the Mysidian Tower itself. Now, there's a big information pool here that you need to keep in mind. Once you complete the tower, all the enemies in the overworld will change. So there are multiple different things you need to make sure you have in your bestiary before you actually do the tower itself. Fortunately, I've been very well aware of this and have collected most of them as they've popped up. Also, Altia, Gartriar, Paloom, and Porf will all be destroyed when you complete the Mysidian Tower. So also, make sure you get whatever resources you need from there. Grab the chest from Altia if you hadn't already, etc, etc. But now we enter Mysidian Tower. Meridian Tower, again, repeating the same process we've done with every single other dungeon, collecting every single chest along the way. Though the tower's a little bit different because the areas of towers are divided across the 4 different elementals that you can come across over the world. And there'll also be a mage at the end of each section that will give you a boss fight to deal with. Anyway, we eventually make it to the top where Minwu currently is, and seeing us that we're now here, he then uses all of his life force to break through the seal to allow us access to the ultimate tome. There's also a handful of other orbs that you can find here that will also give you various different stat boots that are very, very useful at this point in the game. We then head back to Flynn Castle, where we see a bit of a cyclone just above it that is causing havoc. We talk to Hilda and find out this is the Emperor's doing, and this is the reason why Altia and the various other towns have been destroyed. We then use the mirror in Flynn Castle in order to summon the Wyvern to us, which will be our way to get into the cyclone. We talk to Paul in his house once again, and he gives us the last of his secret chests, which also complete the chest for Flynn. We then head into the cyclone, yet another one and done dungeon. I'm getting a bit frustrated at these, but that's a rant for later on. We enter into the Cyclone Dungeon itself with the help of the Wyvern. We then, of course, do the same thing we've done with literally every other dungeon to this point. We rake our way through it, clearing out all the enemies we come across and collecting every single chest that we can find, making sure that we have every single one of them before we head into the final room where the Emperor is waiting for us. And after 2 quick bouts with a bunch of royal guards, the Emperor finally faces us himself. Of course, not alone, because he's too scared to do that. Instead, he's got a wooden golem and some royal guards with him, but we make very much quick work of it. After which, we head right back down to Flynn's castle and have a celebration. We finally defeat the Emperor. It's all over. We're all dancing around, and a soldier that's very heavily injured runs in to tell us this is the Dark Knight. Leon has declared himself the Emperor. Wait a minute. Leon's the Dark Knight? Yep, that's information we now have, and he drops dead. That's great. We are then, of course, told by Hilda that we need to make our way to Palamandium in order to fight the Dark Knight himself. We then head over to Paul's house because that's where Sid is currently staying. You know, he has an airship. He then gives it to us and lends it to us before he passes away. Of course, another death. It's just how it's going to go. And so we now use that to head over to the castle. We jump off the airship to land inside the castle itself, and we rinse and repeat the same process we've done a million times. But hold on, this is also another one and done dungeon. You can tell by my voice I'm getting very annoyed at these. Thankfully, it's the last one of these in this game, so once you clear this one, you don't have to worry about any more dungeons vanishing on you once you leave them. But I also come across the fun that is the Corel in one of the chests. For those of you who don't know, apparently there was a bit of a bug in Final Fantasy 1. I don't know, I never encountered it myself in my playthrough, where these lion-esque type, leopard-esque mobs would effectively hit you for a very weak damage that should have like a small chance to just immediately kill you. The bug was that they just always immediately killed you every single time. And so what did they do? They carried that over to the next game. And I had no idea this is a thing. I never encountered it in the previous game. And here I am encountering it here and suffering because it makes absolutely no sense. You get hit by this monster, they deal like 10, 20, 30 damage, which seems like absolutely nothing. And then your character drops dead, even though your character has thousands of health, which is just really, really stupid and frustrating. Eventually, I make use of a betrayal thing, which then causes all of the Corels to be confused and attack each other, meaning that I don't have to worry about them too much. Still, very frustrating, nevertheless. But he had a lot of health, and he took 0 damage. Why did it knock him down? Whatever, game. Makes sense, I suppose. What the fuck does that mean? Like, genuinely? Oh yeah, by the way, I'm just gonna bite you, deal like 10 damage, and also kill you. Anyway, after blitzing through the rest of the castle, we eventually make our way to the room where the Dark Knight, Leon, is currently hiding. We try to do some reasoning with him, but of course it doesn't quite work until the Emperor returns from hell and just tells Leon to effectively go himself. Before trying to implode on all of us, this is where Ricard just does another self-sacrifice because, of course, another character self-sacrifice to save the rest of the party is always fun, and we escape the castle back to Flynn. We then catch Hilda up on all the events and happenings in the world currently, and the fun fact that the Emperor had come back from hell. We also get the last password available in this game, as in the Jade Passage, completing that achievement finally. We also then get Leon to join the party, which is pretty cool. He's our permanent 4th party member, which is awesome. Though he's nowhere near as good as the other 3 units in your team because, you know, you've had them the entire time, you've been molding them to the best of their abilities, and we don't talk too much about that. We then head over to Castle Dees and talk to the mother again, tell her about the Dragoons and the story of what happened to Ricard. She then eventually gives us the Excalibur, getting that achievement. And at this point, it's really just an exercise of cleaning up all the missable things, which really is 2 bestiary items we want to grab before we head into the Jade Passage. One of them over near the town of Meridia, which is very easy to collect. Hey, there's a Mantis King. And then another one over in the Great Desert near the Colosseum. Sandworms. Oh yeah. These were both things that spawned post-Meridian Tower, and of course we haven't been back to these areas since then, so logically we haven't been able to collect them yet. Anyway, with all that being said and done, we finally make our way into the Jade Passage and start the final sequences of this game. Jade Passage is another rinse and repeat of what we've been doing with every single dungeon in this game, with the additional fun of also making sure we grab all the bestiary monsters you can grab from the Jade Passage that won't be available in Pandemonium. After doing that, we finally head into Pandemonium, the final dungeon of the game, and also the big long one. We then blitz through the most of Pandemonium, collecting all the chests along the way, 4 of which had some bosses hiding within them, collecting all of the things for the bestiary except for the Emperor himself. I would then spend a fair bit of time in order to try to attempt to find the final chest within Pandemonium, but of course this is one of the ones that are hidden in a random area on the map that's through a wall that you need to walk through to find a hidden room that is elsewhere on the map in order to get the last chest. I really do love these type of chests. Rant later. After getting the achievement for getting 100% of chests, we then work on the 2 final things we need before the bestiary and completing the game, and that is getting a magic spell to level 16 and a weapon to level 16. The spell was pretty easy because we had Cure on Maria that was very close to that rank, and that will just naturally get there if we do some more battles and do some more healing. The more questionable one was getting a weapon to level 16. Fortunately, Guy had his axes up to level 13 at this point. Though there are some very quirky things when it comes to trying to level up your weapons, as it levels up when you do an excessive amount of hits against a monster. So what I needed to do was to go to basically the worst axes in the game, and then just have all 3 other people in the party just defend for a little while. We just rotate this for about 5-10 minutes and then wipe out the monsters, go to the ending screen, and we get another level up, and we did this 3 times over until Guy's axe gets to level 16. It is at this point where finally everything is done and dusted, we make our way to the Emperor and fight him. At this point, I have long equipped the Blood Sword for most of this dungeon and noticed its fun little properties. If you didn't know, the Blood Sword takes like a proportion of the enemy's health that is proportionate to the amount of health that they have. So against enemies with very small health pools, the Blood Sword is pretty useless and doesn't do that much, but against mobs that have massive health pools, it makes very quick work. Let's say, for example, the first hit I do with the Blood Sword against him does 9,999 damage, and ultimately it makes this final boss battle very quick work. And some might call this cheating. I would just say, you know, if you've just collected everything in the game and have an idea of what this weapon does, then I think you deserve a little bit of reward of having an easier finale boss fight, especially after the pain and suffering that was the final boss fight of Final Fantasy 1. Holy that was... Wow, the Blood Sword is some stupid weapon. I'm not complaining. That's funny as hell. And with the Beat of the Emperor, we complete 100% of the bestiary, and then after rolling through the credits, seeing that peace has been restored to the road, we get the last achievement for the story, which also gives us the last achievement for the entire game, successfully 100%ing the game within 15 and a half hours, only about 30 minutes longer than my run for Final Fantasy 1, probably because I did more so follow a guide this time around. Final Fantasy 2 is quite an interesting game. I'm not quite sure how to feel about it as of yet, but I suppose I'll get a better understanding of my feelings on this game as I continue to play through the Final Fantasy franchise. From my very basic understanding, a lot of the leveling system to this game was very experimental and doesn't seem like it was ever really tried again properly, probably not for a while. Again, I haven't looked too much into it. I'll have a better understanding as time goes on. One thing that really infuriates me was all the weird secret passages that just exist in this game, and the game doesn't really give you any form of hints that this is going to be a very common thing. Like, the first secret passage you're given is when the bartender in the bar of Flynn actually opens it up purposely for you. It doesn't give you any hints or information that this is going to be a common thing. There are going to be walls that you can simply walk through, that there's not going to be any noticeable markings that lets you know of this kind of problem. I don't know how long I spent going through the Flynn Castle to find the last 3 chests until I just said screw it and looked it up to figure out that, oh, it's simply just a secret passage in one of the way in the secret passage itself that will put you outside. Then you go through the wall again in order to get into the area where there's the last 3 chests. So that's just really annoying and frustrating. The game just never tells you this information. I did follow a guide for most of this game, but I didn't use any guides for any of the dungeons. I did the dungeons 100% blind because I felt like that was more interesting. I used a guide just so I know where I was going within the main game itself, so I didn't have a repeat of what happened with Final Fantasy 1, where I spent several hours just wandering aimlessly around the map until I just said, screw it, I don't know where I'm going next, I don't know what I'm looking for. And it turns out that it was some Mirage place that you can't really see on the map, and you just have to walk into it and hope you find it on accident. And it's just frustrating things like that, and I hope the passage thing doesn't become too common in later games, at least in the way it was here, where it's not really well explained that there's secret passages everywhere. There's nothing that really gives off the fact that there's a secret passage. You just kind of have to walk through walls randomly and hope that you make it through one and find the gap in the wall that allows you to go in to grab the chests that are in those areas, as well as the additional annoyance of all of, like, 4 different dungeons were one and dones. You could only enter them once. You couldn't really leave after that fact. You had to now complete the dungeon in that run. And if you forget to grab all of the chests, then you will never be able to go back to recomplete that. And what makes it worse is you have to double check you get all the chests before you even leave, because once you complete the dungeon icon vanishes from the map and you can never double check again. So if you accidentally miss a chest there, didn't realize it, you get to the end of the game and you see like, I'm missing like 1 or 2 chests and I don't know where they are. It's because it's probably in one of those dungeons that has vanished off the map, never to be seen again. Either way, that's 100% of Final Fantasy 2. Let me know of your thoughts of my playthrough, as well as the game itself, in the comments down below. And if you did enjoy this video, make sure to hit the like button and also subscribe. It'd be highly appreciated. This is a somewhat new channel. We're just getting our feeding. Either way, I'll see you guys next time. Final Fantasy 3 will be happening probably early next year. Bye-bye!